everybody. Thanks for joining us here at KSOL Media. I am with Isaac Stitt.
Hi guys, how you doing?
There he is, writer and director of the film From the Furnace. This is going to be an interview with Isaac talking about the film. So Isaac, I got a bunch of questions for you. Do you want to just get right into it, or is there anything you'd like to say first?
Yeah, let's get right into it.
Not that this is going to be some kind of hard-hitting interview or anything like that, but I'm going to try to dig into, where this movie came from.
And this is a little bit spoily.
Yes.
But that's okay, because right now it's only on a festival tour. So we'll get into that in a little bit, I'm sure.
Right. So my first question, though, if you could, by avoiding the synopsis that you've put out there for the film, if you could explain in your own words what From the Furnace is.
I guess like a way to define it for me is a glorified autobiography of one really bad summer I had. And that is what From the Furnace is. And it follows a young man as everything in his life seems to fall apart, and he's dealing with that internal struggle, and you see the external struggle as he's also trying to save his city from three villains.
Okay. Well, in the beginning of your explanation actually goes into one of my biggest personal questions, which was, how did you come about with this story? I mean, this is you're not a cop. You don't have cops in your family that I'm aware of, at least in your immediate family.
That's correct. Yeah.
But you decided to use the premise of your hero being a police officer and all the various things that he has to deal with in this moment of his life, and all these tragedies that are happening around him. How did you come up with this? How did you come up with this story?
Yeah, that's kind of a two-part answer. So the first part is a lot of it was past experience, whether it's losing, the girl you fell in love with, whether it feels like you're getting nowhere in your job. And I just had one really bad summer where I seemed to really bottom out, and everything that I was holding on to seemed to crumble beneath me. As far as is the actual story, like you said, we do follow the story of Lance James. He's a police officer. That kind of came out of the head of my buddy Chad. We had always talked about wanting to write a film together, just because we had always done film projects together in high school. And for us, we always wanted to do a superhero movie, but we felt at that point that was just overdone. So we were like, well, what's the closest thing we can do as a superhero that's real to life? And we decided on a cop after watching a couple of films like End of Watch and Law and Order and stuff like that. And so basically what would happen is Chad would give me these little plot points. He's like, I think it'd be really cool if you did this. And then I would write up to that point, write that scene, and then we'd just kind of collab together and be like, okay, where should we take this story next? And then eventually Chad moved away to Stevens Point, and it kind of just became just me. But he would kept sending me little, hey, it'd be cool if, for instance, we have a scene where your anarchist figure does a torture sequence, but instead of torturing the priest, how about he tortures himself in front of the priest? Like, how screwed up would that be? I'd be like, that's a great idea. We right up to it. And so we just tried. It was very based on pop culture that was around us, and we make a lot of references to pop culture because I believe you should give homage to those that inspire you. But again, a lot of it was also just experience and that heartbreak and that feeling hopelessness.
Okay. Well, and I mean, the film definitely, in my opinion, the focal point was the fact that, what was his name? Lance James?
Lance James.
Yeah. And just the fact that he's got all these things that are kind of crumbling around him. I mean, he's dealing with what would it be? His lieutenant, his commissioner is corrupt. He's got the capitalist, the gangster, which is just ruining his city, and then you've got chaos, which is doing the same thing, but is actually being used as a pawn, which is ironic. At least in my opinion, it seems like he was being used as a pawn by everybody, which is ironic because he was the one who, at least in his own mind, felt that he was the only one that wasn't a pawn.
Yeah, that was fun to write.
There's a lot of. A lot of it really worked really well together, and then you had Lance, who is dealing with all of this. And so you're saying that that was kind of a reflection on how you wanted to tell that story as far as something you were dealing with in real life, and how a lot of things in your own life were either seeming corrupt or weren't working out, or there was. Is that, am I catching that right? This is basically a metaphor for that.
Absolutely. It was like, I believe you got to write out of your experiences, and sometimes that was the way I had to cope with everything I was going through. Was I needed an outlet, and that was it. And I figured, if I can write problems that are bigger than the ones I'm going through right now, maybe I can write myself out of this hole that I'm in. And so obviously, like, I've never been engaged, but I've had my heart broken, before, and I've never been part of a corrupt department, but I've worked jobs where it seemed like you're getting nowhere, and you feel like you're the only one like trying, and just like little nuances like that, and then at the same time, I was trying to write a bigger story, one that would I guess like give hope to other people, and also in a way also be a reflection of today's society and what was going on, at least and from my viewpoint, and from the viewpoints of a lot of people that I was hearing around in the college dorms. So I think that's one, you have to respect your surroundings when you're writing. You got to listen. That's the best part of being a writer, is in order to be the best writer you can be, you got to be a good listener. You got to listen to hear what people are saying around you, because people say the most quotable things. And so there's a lot of things I heard that ended up in the film. And I guess experiences, listening on other people's conversations, and like you said, kind of doing here's my take on the world at this time.
Well, and it is said, and I don't have the actual quote for this, but it's said that nothing is actually truly original.
Oh yeah, I believe that 100%.
Everything is taken from everything else. A little bit of a writer's or an artist's secret. We don't try to tell people that too much. But so let me ask you this, because you made mention of this, and I'm very curious, because I knew you at the time that you were making this. In fact, you had worked for me prior.
Yes, that's correct.
And it sounds like that was right around the same time. I'm not that corrupt individual, am I?
No.
I know I'm not. But a lot of this is coming out of your college life. And if you don't want to oust anything too much, I completely understand. But what was going on in your life that was... because a lot of this just has to deal with corruption, people becoming corrupt, people changing from experiences that they happened, like Chaos, for example, who was kind of a common thug and criminal, goes absolutely insane after he loses his wife. I mean, what was going... If you don't mind me asking, what was going on in your life, like at that time, that was so corrupt, that was really just so screwed up?
So I guess as far as like the corruption part, it was like, my thought process is like, when someone goes through something agonizing or something heartbreaking, how do they usually turn? Do they reach for the light in that moment? And then more often than not, unfortunately, you see people just do a downward spiral. And so, I mean, at that point, I was only about a year and a half removed away from being put in foster care at the age of 17, 16, like I said, I had just lost the love of my life at the time. Like the very next day, this is actually kind of a funny story. It's funny now. So we broke up, and then the very next day, my car broke down. The very next day after that, my brother and my dad both ended up in the hospital with just health complications. So it just seemed like on every side, things were just falling apart.
Wow, man. I mean, I knew you and I would talk and see each other regularly during that time. I remember you and your girlfriend breaking up. I do not remember you ever telling me about all the rest of that, though.
Yeah, it was.
I don't think you did tell me about it then.
Yeah, it was hard. And I mean, pretty much, actually, I think Jason was the only one that he kind of figured it out. He Jason Kavlin, he actually ends up being part of our cast, which that'll be a whole other story in a minute. But he was like, he always called me Skater Boy, because I was always walking around with like bro tanks and a skateboard, and he said, "Oh, that summer you turned sad, Skater Boy," and I was really hoping you were okay. So yeah, I had all this stuff going on, and I guess like my whole thought was like, okay, do I do a downward spiral, as most of my friends or whatnot I've seen do, or do I try to reach for that light? And I wasn't perfect. I made a lot of mistakes. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I guess I was writing about that, and I guess in a way to like try to not be that. If I guess is probably the best way I can describe it.
Sure, sure, sure. And definitely something that at least that I noticed while watching the film last night is the fact that Lance, while he is dealing with all these things that are falling apart or are corrupt around him, he seems very impervious to it, at least as far as it corrupting him.
Mm-hmm.
He stays to what he should do, and while he does question it at times as far as how to persevere, at no point are you concerned that he's going to fall victim to these things corrupting him.
I've always admired men that are just steady. You know, the greatest men in history. I mean, whether you want to, you can talk about George Washington, you can talk about Abraham Lincoln. In these times of just great trial or things seem to be falling apart, they stayed steady. They stayed true to what was right. You know, and that's what I admire. I think that's what makes a real man. I think staying steady in the time of great darkness, and that was what I really wanted to bring out in that character.
Okay.
Was that he was going to stay steady, and he was a rock. He was going to stick to that rock, even no matter how hard it was, and if the whole world was telling him he was wrong.
So that was very intentional.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that was something that was coming out. I was a little unsure about. I thought that was the case, but that's part of what I wanted to ask you about. It was intentional that while Lance would try to find guidance as to how to deal with these things, you definitely never caught that he would ever, you know, as far as his way of thinking, as far as his values and morals. At no point did you think that would be something that would
be compromised.
Him.
Yeah, for sure.
So okay. All right, so let me ask you about something here, because you brought it up a little bit, and we're going to get a little personal here. And this is probably
Absolutely.
about the most personal I plan on getting into. Of course, I don't know where all of your inspiration comes from, so I'm learning a lot of that right now, which is the point.
Good.
The situation with Lily in the film.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, now, and I knew about your breakup with your girlfriend at the time, and I figured that you were probably writing some of this right around that time. I thought it was an odd choice that Lily, and the relationship between Lance and Lily is obviously a part of the film, but as soon as it's there, it's gone. And then it pops up again near the end where Lance says, well, you know, we're trying to work things out, and maybe that's a thing that'll happen. Yeah, I thought it was an odd choice, because in most cop films, there's almost always some kind of romantic thing. Whether you're talking about McClane from Die Hard and the fact that he's always pissing off his wife, and that's an ongoing thing throughout the movies, or if you're talking about your typical B cop movie love interest, there's almost always some kind of female lead, and to that effect there is as well. Lisa Lily is a female character in the movie, but it's almost, besides the fact that you establish that they're having a bad relationship, they're having a bad time, and then that's established, and then it's done, and then you don't really hear anything more about it. Why did you make the choice to not do that?
Well, the big reason I think is I was trying to, like, at that point in my life we had broken up, and I was trying to figure out how to live life and do life without her. And that was really hard, because she had been there for me through a lot of my hardest times. You know, when I ended up in foster care, she was there for me when I was going through stuff with my stepdad, and we weren't on the greatest terms at the time. You know, she was like my rock, and then all of a sudden she was gone. You know, and I had to continue doing life, even when all these bad things were happening after we were broken up. You know, I still had to stay strong and figure life out. And that's what I kind of wanted Lance to do, even with all these bad things happening to him after they had broken up, he still had to figure out life. And he could very easily use that breakup as an excuse to do a downward spiral again. But he made that conscious choice. You know, I'm gonna still do the right thing. I'm not gonna, you know, take the easy road. Now that she's not here, I can kind of get away with more, you know.
Okay.
And it was just like one of those added pressures. I mean, you see him in that car scene. We bring that scene back, and it was, you know, he's contemplating, do I end it all here? Do I take the easy way out and kill myself right here? And that car ride was real. That was a real car ride I had, where I was driving up on the highway that towards the end of that week, and it just seemed like every pressure was on me. And it's like, you know, if I just jerk this wheel the right way, it's all gone. All this pressure's gone. And I had to make that decision. No, there's still something here to be around for. There's still something to live for, you know, and it's going to be okay, even though life sucks right now. And that ending, was as far as them getting back together. When at the time I wrote it, I think it was kind of like a silent hope. Maybe this is just for a time, and then as the years went by, it became more of a, well, we need this movie to end on a little bit of a happier note because it's a very dark film.
It gets pretty bad for Lance. It definitely does.
So we were like, we need to keep that. We got to keep a little bit of hope for the audience, so that way they're not like, go walk away completely depressed.
No, I think it's fine. But what I found more odd than anything, I think it would have been odder if something hadn't been mentioned at the end. But overall, like I said, I thought it was kind of odd. Normally, these kind of movies have kind of a female B story or C story going on throughout the films. So I thought it was a little odd that it was like, okay, so you've established he's what I think engaged. Or is he married at that time? When
he was engaged. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, they're engaged. Okay, and then it's like, okay, well, we're having this trouble. You establish that there's something here, and then poof, it was gone. Now it makes perfect sense to me. You were trying to write a story where specifically Lance did not have this in his life, and in fact, intentionally trying to deal with his issues without a significant other.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing to remember with this film is that while it was, heavily influenced by outside, and as any writer is heavily influenced by outside sources, this was my story I was writing, and this was my experience, and that's all I know how to write. I only know how to write out of my experience. I admire guys that can write these fantastical, characters and that are completely outside their experiences they could have ever had. I admire that. That's a great quality. I wish I had that. For me, I'm a backpack writer. I got to write what's in my backpack and what the baggage that I carry. And that's what I was going through at the time. And hopefully someone was able to relate and take something away from that.
Well, I definitely think people will be able to relate to that. Yeah, I think you did a really good job of setting up, like you said. I don't know if I'd necessarily say a dark place, but definitely a really bad place. I mean, everything, you do a good job of showing, surrounding Lance around all of these horrible things.
Yeah.
You do a really good job of that. The film is definitely focused on that and in him persevering at the end.
Yes.
Talking a little bit more about that, though, there's definitely a theme of religion in the film.
Yes.
And so let me ask you about that a little bit. Obviously, Lance is a Christian.
Yes.
And I know that you were a person of faith as well. So how does that play a role in this, and how did that play a role, at least in your inspiration to add it into the film?
Yeah. So part of with this film, not besides giving a story of hope, I also wanted to make a good faith-based film, but not be labeled a faith-based film, because I think faith-based films get a very bad rap, as well as they should, because they're often cheesy, overdone, just awful films.
It's a line
Yeah.
that they walk.
Yeah, and so we wanted to make just a really good movie that might have some faith, and so that way it could appeal to multiple audiences. I think it was important for Lance to have something to put his faith into, as that's something I was putting my faith in, that I was trusting everything was going to be okay. But I was very deliberate in who was delivering these faith-based messages. I wanted to make sure it was always a priest, or the pastor giving those lines, because I didn't want to go the normal route of another faith-based film where everybody's preaching you a sermon, because that's not my intent. My intent is just to tell a story. My intent's to say, there's hope in this dark world. And here's what I believe is going to get us out of this dark, and you can agree or disagree. But either way, I want to make a good movie, so you're going to enjoy this anyway. Either way,
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of the intention. So I mean, if someone decides I want to check out this faith thing a little bit more because maybe it worked for this character, it worked for this director, that's awesome. I mean, that's great. But if you walk away and say, hey, that was a good movie, I'm okay with that too. That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. All right, so let me ask you a couple questions, and I'm sure this will bring up some more interesting things for you to expound upon. What was something that you wanted to put into this film that didn't make it?
We had to cut one scene, and I'm really disappointed. It was one of my favorite scenes, but unfortunately, we just couldn't get the sound right. The sound quality was awful. It was actually the very first scene we ever shot, so it wasn't the greatest quality, but it was some great great dialogue between Lance and Gordon. I felt in the end copy that we have, you don't see a good enough friendship with Gordon, and this scene would have really cemented that. It was very similar to a conversation that I had in real life, and where I was kind of talking about what things had been going on in my life with this girlfriend. So that's kind of what Lance is doing to Gordon. He's like, here's what happened with me and Lily. I hope she's like okay, and I'm just trying to like live life. And Gordon, they start talking about how are we, what are we going to do about the capitalist and the chaos, all this stuff is falling apart. And Lance has this line where he says, if I can make a difference in one person's life, then this is all worth it. And I felt like that was a really important, powerful line, because he does make a difference. He makes a difference in Todd Decker's life, and in the end, it's all worth it because all the corruption and evil is put to rest. And I wanted that to be a takeaway, that if you can go through all this pain, and again, and this is kind of preaching to myself here, I guess, is if all that pain and that heartache helps one person to know that there's hope and there's light, then it was all worth it. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And I really wish that line would have made it in, but unfortunately, just the quality wasn't there, and we had to cut it.
Okay, all right. The flip side of that coin, what's something that's in that film that you wish you could get out now? Something that's in there that you really don't like, something that you wish you could change but you can't.
There's two things. One is I wish, and we can't do this one because we didn't have the time or the budget, and that's get more moving camera shots. There's times where the camera's on the move and it's great, but during some of those longer dialogue scenes, I wish we would have got the camera moving. One, that was me doing my first time doing a film, not realizing how slow that makes the pace. Two is just, again, we didn't have the time or the money to do a bunch of camera setups. We would show up on set. We'd film like 20 hours a day sometimes. Trying to do 4 or 5 scenes because we only had 15 days to shoot a feature film. Which is unheard of.
No, yeah,
so I mean, when you're doing 5 scenes, you basically got four camera setups if you're lucky. So I wish you could have got the camera moving a bit more, but that's a technical thing that'll come with if I ever do another project. We'll be better at. The other thing is, and we're actually talking about for our next festival, we're planning on dropping this scene. Is we're gonna cut down that funeral scene at the very end of the film. There's a funeral, and the ending goes on a little bit too long. It was supposed to be like a touching thing where he's like looking at the pictures and he's like, I forgive you, I thank you, whatever. And it was supposed to be just like this heart-to-heart moment as he's just like, letting that baggage fall off his shoulders so he can move on with his life. That's what it was supposed to convey. But I think it just really slows the ending down. So I think we're going to cut that. So you're going to see him having this little talk with Father Timothy saying, I'm going to move on to a different city. I need to leave this past behind. He's going to say goodbye to Gordon, and then he's going to drive off. And I think that's how we're going to try to redo the ending, because that ending was just a little bit too long. We pulled a Peter Jackson, and
yeah, you did.
I could feel people going, all right, come on, like wrap it up.
It was long ending. That's it's all right. All right. So I'm sure you've gotten this question a lot, and quite honestly, Isaac, it's a phenomenal thing. It's an amazing thing that at your age, you're 23, correct?
Yes, in April.
So when you were making this thing, when you were actually filming this, you were 21.
I was 20.
Oh, you were 20.
I just turned 20. Yep.
All right. I mean, how'd you pull it off, man? And for those who weren't there for the Q&A last night, because you did actually get that in detail a bit. I mean, how did you pull this off at the age of 20 years old?
It was learning to hear the word no a lot, and surrounding myself with an amazing team. So what I mean by that is, first I got a really great producer's name is Kurt Krause. He worked on the film Public Enemies with Johnny Depp that filmed here. I was going to say a couple years ago, but I guess it's more than that now. Did a lot of other independent film work. He had directed and wrote his own film when he was 26, and I just knew he had a lot of experience. I'd worked with him before, and I was like, hey, I want you to produce this film for me because I have no idea what I'm doing. And he was like, absolutely on board, thankfully. And then from there, it was just people I knew. or had heard about the project in one way or another, and they wanted to be on board, and they believed in the mission, they believed in the message, and they just jumped on board. And that's how we got a lot of our actors. Some of them were even my neighbors, which like Jason Cavlin. At that point, we weren't even friends. I just needed a stand-in at the time for a little teaser we were shooting. I knocked on his door, and I was like, hey, you want to do shots and film this thing with me? And thankfully, Jason was like, yeah, absolutely. And that's how our friendship was born. As far as when you hear the word no a lot, what I mean by that is that I did a lot of cold calls. We'd go door to door, business to business, asking for business sponsorships, saying, hey, if you give us money or provide like meals or services for us, we will make sure that we thank you in our credits. We're going to feature your products in our film. Shout out Kessler's Diamonds. And
always with the Kessler's Diamonds.
and you know, we're gonna make sure your logo gets up on our posters. And thankfully, there's quite a few local businesses that were willing to pour their money and their time into us. Even though there was many who weren't at the time weren't willing. And actually, a funny story. Last night, we had approached a guy. He'll remain unnamed, and he had turned us down at the time and was saying, you know, I just don't think this is for me. And he was at the premiere last night, and he came up to me, and he was like, hey, I don't believe in the word regret, but I just want you to know, I wish I would have helped you guys out a little bit more. And if you ever do this again, I definitely want to be on board. And that was probably the coolest thing I heard all night. Just how we had basically helped a guy do a 180. You know, he didn't believe in us at the time, and you know, didn't really know what he was going to get into, and seeing the end result, he was like, you know what, I definitely want to be on board next time. So that was awesome.
Let me talk about Jason for a minute now. Jason, who does stuff on K-Sol Media as well. The three of us, along with Ian, who helped me form the company. So those, especially those of you who follow our Walking Dead reviews, if loosely explained as reviews, more just Jason and I gibber with some gibberish about the latest episode of The Walking Dead. So that's eye opening to me, because again, I remember when you guys like very quickly became like thick as thieves, man.
That's correct, man.
Like out of nowhere, it's like Jason and Isaac, which I mean I knew Jason pretty well at that time then too. But out of nowhere, I always was like, well, you know, I can kind of understand how these guys would end up hanging out together. They're both kind of eccentric, and they're big thinkers.
And I think honestly, you know, if you break it down, we're pretty different people in terms of,
in a lot of ways, yeah.
But I think we kind of have the same core values, and we both believe in big things. And dude, that guy's like my brother now. Like seriously, he's one of my best friends. I'm his best man in his wedding that's coming up. Which I'm super excited for.
Don't bring up Kessler's Diamonds as a sponsor for that.
Oh no, he got a different
Okay.
I tried to get him to get a Kessler's, and he said no. Because his dad was paying for it, and his dad's like, we want to whatever.
Okay.
But that relationship was literally born overnight. He did that shoot with me, and then the next day he was at my door because I was cooking and he wanted something to eat, and I like gave it to him, and then we just kind of became this back and forth thing. We were just hanging out all the time, and next thing you know, he's my best friend. He's hearing me talk about all my problems, and he was kind of going through a really rough patch at that same time too. You know, not really sure what he wanted in life or where he was going. He was very scared. You know, felt like he was letting everyone down, and I think that's kind of, we bonded over our pain in a way as well. I mean, he had just gotten out of a bad breakup as well, and we just kind of bonded over writing this film, and next thing you know, he's a part of it, and that's probably the coolest thing, is saying I did a film with my best friend.
Yeah, you know, you guys are living the college life. Then weird things happen during college.
Yeah, you know, some kids trip on acid. We wrote a script.
Right. So I want to talk about some of the performances here real quick. Some of the standout ones for me.
For sure.
And we'll talk about any others that you want to talk about that stood out for you. You're obviously coming from a different perspective on that than I have. So let's talk about Jason and his character Chaos. There's obviously a Joker inspiration to that.
Yes.
Was that intentional, or did you kind of let Jason create that?
A little bit of both. I had written this guy because me and Chad, when we were writing the script, we said, how cool would it be if we had a villain blow up the Hollywood sign? and that was our inspiration. And then I was looking into the Joker, Moriarty from the Sherlock BBC series, just very cold, calculating villains. And if you watch the show in Sherlock, the whole time he's kind of a pawn, and the Joker is just kind of, he's in control, but he's not in control. And I really like that aspect of this chaotic figure, almost even in Lance's life, and you kind of see that a little bit too, that he keeps popping up in these little random instances. So it's almost like he's like a character, but he might also be almost like this mystic entity as well. And that's what we were kind of like trying to messing with, like let people like really play with what's his real backstory, who is this guy. You hear a little couple like nuances and like things, but you don't really know. So, and then I was like, oh, here's your inspiration. Oh, think Moriarty, think Joker, think Ted Bundy, and go for it. And he turned him into this anarchist, socialist, thing that it is. And it's pretty awesome. My greatest fear was that people were going to walk away out of the theater going, man, I thought Chaos was awesome. I love that guy, which is what they did with Heath Ledger's Joker. A lot of people loved that character. So I was like, I need to do something, make a scene so dark and twisted that people are going to hate this guy, because he's kind of fun. He's kind of fun the first half of the movie. He's disrupting the gangsters' plans, and, he's just kind of having fun. And then so we're like, but once he starts torturing a priest and then he blows up a church, I was hoping those little darker elements would really and then he kills darker. Gordon. And then he kills Gordon. I was kind of hoping people by the end of the film they wouldn't be sympathetic or fans of the Joker, or Chaos.
That's all right. No, yeah, I think he definitely stands out as the most let's say flamboyant character.
Yes.
We'll go with that term. Definitely a role that Jason could play. I don't think he had any aspirations of acting before that, did he?
He was a crew member in high school, so he would do crew, but he had never acted before. So that was his first acting role ever. And if you ask his fiance, he wasn't really acting. That's him on an average Tuesday. So
Jason in real life is definitely a flamboyant person as well. It's actually kind of funny because during our reviews, he's pretty calm, but he's also very tired. So
yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask a little bit about. Let's see, where is he here? Father Timothy. I think he was definitely one of the more standout characters, at least as far as the actor was concerned. Correct me if I get this wrong, but Steve Pavlik?
Pavlik, yep.
Pavlik?
Yep.
I mean, how did that come about? He definitely stands out as, I think, one of the best performances of the movie.
Yeah, he's a Chicago-based actor. Actually, he's had backup roles in like shows like Shameless, Chicago Fire, Chicago MD. He's also you actually see him in Public Enemies. He was working on that set. He was one of I believe one of the officers or one of Johnny Depp's men. And anyway, we had put out an ad looking for an older male actor, and he just happened to respond to it. And he kind of came along because he noticed we were getting a couple other bigger names. Dan Davies, for instance, who has won multiple film awards. His films have won. He just was in a film in Nollywood, which is the third biggest film market, and that film won numerous awards over in Africa. It's called A Trip to Jamaica. So he noticed Dan was on it, and then Keith Kelly, who's the police chief, had just signed on with us and was telling people he had made it onto this film, and then that's when Steve signed on with us. And he was actually a friend of Kurt's, he was a friend of Keith's, and he said, hey, if these two guys are willing to stand behind this kid, then I am willing to. And honestly, he's one of my favorite people to work with on set. He was by far, I think, one of the oldest members in the cast. And so it was kind of weird for me as a 20-year-old kid trying to direct him and tell him what to do.
I bet it was pretty intimidating.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's another thing a lot of people don't know is that our entire crew, excluding Kurt and Chanel, were UW Fox Valley students. So our whole crew was 20-something-year-old kids, and I was the youngest guy on set at almost at all times.
And you're the boss.
And I was the boss. And all of our casts, I mean, excluding like a handful, were pretty much all professional actors with bigger shows or movies behind their name. And but every day he would come up and hug me, put his arm around me, and just be like, "Hey, man, just so you know, everything's gonna be all right. You know, you're doing a great job. Just keep believing." And even the days, where I felt like I did nothing right that day, he always believed in me. So it was so great to have him there at the premiere last night, and then to hear him enjoy it and just be like, "Wow, you did an amazing job." That was probably one of the cooler moments last night.
So Dan Davies, who did he play?
He is Dante Cohen. He had a bit of a cameo. He was originally cast in a bigger part, but a trip to Jamaica filming schedule interfered with our schedule, and so he had to go overseas. So we basically wrote him into our script, and he has like the cameo. So he's the capitalist father. You hear how
okay, that's what I thought.
Yep, you hear how he gets knocked off, and some would argue it's well deserved for how abusive he is to his son, and yeah.
Was that something that didn't make it into the script because of the scheduling change? Like, were you gonna actually show him getting killed?
We weren't sure how far to take it. We felt like it. We had played around with the idea of him like physically abusing him and whatnot, but we felt like that was going to be overdone by that point. So we wanted a more mental, psychological abuse, and you kind of hear it how he's degrading him and kind of embarrassing him in front of his little brother, saying how no one's going to embarrass our family again, like your brother did here, kind of taunting him in his study, as he's saying, when you have what I have, then you can give the orders. Till then, you just sit there, and just kind of like those mental probes, and that's sometimes those almost hurt worse from a man you respect, or an older male when you respect them. Sometimes it hurts worse when they embarrass you or dress you down in front of other people than it does when they hit you, so.
Okay, so yeah, let me ask you a little bit about Todd Decker, played by Keith Kelly. That I think that was the other standout role as well. I'd even mentioned that to you at the end of the night. At the after party last night, that those two had really stood out. So I mean, I guess overall, the question I would have about him, did that character change a lot from how you had originally envisioned him?
Yes, he did. He was originally a bit more harsher, intimidating, unwavering, and just a not a good guy, and not one you would potentially sympathize with. And that was just how it was kind of written. And then Keith came on, and as he did the role, he kind of made Todd Decker a little bit a character with almost no backbone, and a little bit more sympathetic. Like he was trying to be this conniving schemer, and everything backfired, and all he wanted was to do the right thing. And I liked it. I thought that was a really good take on. So
that was a conscious decision on Keith's part to change
on Keith's part.
Role?
Yes.
Did he talk to you about that once you had noticed it, or beforehand, or?
It was kind of a both and. He was like, "Hey, here's how I kind of see this guy," and I was like, "Okay, well, let's play with it, and like let's see how it works." And the first scene he shot was actually when he's in his office talking with Lance, saying, Mike didn't make it, we're gonna have to let Mike off easy. So, and then we watched a couple times. I was like, you know what? I can see where you're going. Let's continue this throughout the film, and I think it really works, especially when you see him having his confrontation with the capitalist in his home. And you just see how he's really a nobody. And I think it makes it better. You see him kind of standing up for himself in a way, standing up for justice, standing up for his city when he decides to, end everything.
It definitely, he stands out. I mean, the performance stands out, but also I would say as a character, he definitely is he feels like one of the more three-dimensional characters. I think for exactly what he was saying. He took an interesting twist, especially with the kind of things that Decker is caring about in the movie, and his kind of approaches about keeping up appearances and making sure that people don't get the wrong idea about this or about that. I think from my perspective, it fell really in line with the character.
Yeah.
Trying to approach things from that perspective on trying to solve problems or trying to avoid problems, and sacrificing things that are important. It definitely felt like someone who was a bit weaker and someone who'd lost his way over
Yeah.
time.
I would say almost an accidental villain, an
Right.
intentional hero, is how I would describe his character. And I hope that's the takeaway.
Oh no, I definitely think it was. So what were some of the other performances that really stood out for you besides the ones we had just talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really loved Dale, Dale Fenella. He played the capitalist. I loved his performance, especially when he was interrogating Mike in the cellar, talking about, what were you thinking? I think Dale just has these phenomenal eyes, and they're a little bit crazy, a little bit psycho. And by the end of the film, you really don't know who's the real psycho. Is it Chaos? Is it the capitalist? The Chaos thrives off anarchy, while the capitalist wants order and control, and everything he seems to be doing kind of seems to go contrary to that. As he's by the end of the film, he seemed to be losing control, and he's just becoming more ruthless. And so I think that was kind of fun just to watch his character develop and how he carried that character. I thought young Lance was a phenomenal job, played by Micah. I'm blanking on his Ledesma, and I thought he did a phenomenal job. He was in sixth grade when he took on that role, and with child actors, you never really know what you're going to get. Sometimes they nail it, sometimes it's okay. And I felt for the most part, he did an amazing job. One of my favorite performances, I think, throughout the film, though, would definitely be from Ryan McCrum. He played Lance James, and my favorite scene would be that whole car ride after he just saw Gordon gone down, and he's just basically having his life replay through his head as he's trying to process what he's just seen, and just how he was breaking down and kind of coming to the end of his rope. We actually fun fact, we filmed that scene 3 times. We filmed it once, I believe in like January or very, very early in our shooting schedule. We just kind of got a shot, and we felt like, oh man, I don't know if we got enough, so we should do it again. And we did it, and it was just absolutely awful. He just wasn't in the moment. It was just the end of a long day. Nothing was going right. And then so that was the very last thing we shot in the film. And I kind of pulled him aside right before we got in. I was like, hey, it's the last time we're going to shoot this. It's been a rough month. I want you just to pour everything out, everything you're feeling, all your emotions, just let it all out. And he did. And we took all 3, and I think you kind of see it. You see the fear, which I think he had on the first time we did it, because he wasn't really sure what he was doing. He was still a young actor. The second time was a lot of anger, I think, as he was just frustrated with the way things were going throughout the bad things happen throughout the day, and people get upset. And then he was finally able to have that release that third time we filmed. I think you get to see all 3 stages, and that's one of my favorite performances.
All right, so I think we're gonna wrap things up here. Before we do that, though, is there anything else that you would like to tell anybody who's listening or watching this about the film, or about maybe what they can do if they want to? If, as you said, a big part of this film is to inspire. Is there anything inspiring as far as someone who wants to create things as well that you would like to tell them, or anything in general? Just an opportunity to say anything else that you'd like to say.
This will be my tangent. First off, create. I think it's one of the most freeing things. It's an outlet you have, and it's the only therapy that you're going to get something back. I know people will turn to sex, drugs, and whatnot, but you don't really get much back. Whereas when you turn to something creative, at the end, you have something tangible to hold. And so I strongly recommend it. And then also create out of your own experience. That's you only live your life, and you're your best critic, and you know yourself the best. So write and inspire other people with your story, because a lot of other people have gone through what you've gone through. You just don't know it yet. To find out more about the film, you can go on our website, fromthefurnace.wixsite.com/2017. You can also follow us on Instagram at From the Furnace. We have a Facebook page, From the Furnace. We will be starting our festival tour run shortly. We're actually having a meeting this week to figure out which exactly festivals we're going to start entering. And if you check out our website, you're going to see a full, almost like a band tour list of what cities we will be in this year or the next year. We do not have DVDs as of yet. We're trying to get picked up by a distributor, but they will be coming. Also, thank you to all of our business sponsors. Thank you for everyone that's part of this film. We could not have done this without you. And thank you so much for having me on, Chris. You believed in me from day one, and it was having you there last night was a very special thing to me, and I really appreciated it.
It was my pleasure. It was great to see it. I know at some points it was toyed upon me actually maybe even being parts of production. At the end of the day, being on the outside watching this and seeing the completed product, I think was very rewarding for me, man. I mean, again, for someone at your age to have completed something of this size of this girth overall of a project, with the experience that you had, which was next to none, it's nothing but impressive, and I think that's definitely a word that should be coming out of anybody's mouth who's talking about this movie, is that, you know, and not just for you, but for a lot of the performances and just a lot of went into it. It's very impressive. It was my pleasure to be there last night. You could not have stopped me.
Thank you.
From being there last night. No, but that's great. And I was going to ask you if there was anything you wanted to plug, but you did all that too. But just to make sure, though, the best way to get news as far as the next film festival, as far as DVDs, they should follow the Facebook page. That's the go-to.
That would be the go-to. Yep. As far, and then also our website. So our Facebook page, like I said, From the Furnace. And then our website again is fromthefurnace.wixsite.com/2017. And we have trailers. If you want to find out who we're actually planning on supporting with this film, it's Carabello Coffee. They support local missions in Nicaragua. They're running an orphanage. They're working with their community. And Newport, Kentucky, I actually grew up knowing Mr. Carabello. And so 10% of everything we make off this film will be supporting their work over in Nicaragua. And then you can also find out more about our business sponsors on our website as well, and a little bit more about some of the leads. So definitely check out our website. We also, on our Instagram, we have a lot of behind the scenes pictures, a lot of stills. So definitely check that out as well.
All right, guys. That's Isaac Stitt, writer and director of From the Furnace. Thank you very much for doing this interview.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I want to apologize real quick for the lack of quality. The initial plan was that we were going to actually do this live. Things changed, so we ended up having to do this over Skype. So the audio quality may not be the best, which is a shame. But sometimes, just like with an indie film, sometimes you just gotta go off the seat of your pants and make it work somehow. So,
and that's pretty much how this film came together.
right. So, but that's gonna do it for us for now. Follow up with him on his Facebook page. I can't wait for this to come out on DVD. I will have a copy.
I can't wait to get it to you, man. It's
that simple.
This commentary will be on it, so I'm excited.
That even better. There you go. But that is going to do it for us. So thank you very much. I'm going to do a little bit of a plug myself. So again, this is brought to you by KSOL Media, and we are, at least at this current time, we are just a small little YouTube channel. If you can give us a like and subscribe for this video, that would be great. And of course, you will continue to find Isaac here at KSOL Media, as well as we do reviews and other things for TV and film. So, all right, that's going to do it, though. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.